Hi, and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the path that takes you from afraid of the world and transforms you into your true identity, your true self, the version of you that creates your life. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I was a writer and a reader. Growing up, I found that there were books that described others that they they were like me. They saw the world like me. They were observing the world, and they saw things different than the people around them. And I came to find that there were great historical figures who carved their own path and didn't do things like the people around them did. I found that as an observer, it's very easy to take on labels from the world and have the world tell you who you are. And this path of who am I becomes a path of getting rid of labels and finding your true identity. And I ultimately found a life where I can share my gifts, I can help people, I can reach out, and I can share what I found on my journey, my road, which was, for me, meditation, something that I can give to the world, to my world, and help it. I'd like to share with you my favorite song is Tool by Lateralis, and some of the lyrics it contains. It says, I'm reaching up, I'm reaching out, I'm reaching up to embrace the random. I'm reaching out to embrace whatever may come. And if you talk to people, they will tell you you can't just seek the random. And you can, because it's not any random. It's you're pulling things to you that call you, that that you're guided by. You don't know why. And the song ends with, following our will and wind, we may just go where no one's been. And that hits that chord of what's out there, what's out in outer space. That sense is our real identity. That is our real human nature that we share with everyone. So, on the relationship of fear and truth, I'm now reading A Course in Miracles, and I would better title this book something like Destroying Fear, or From Fear to Love, or Choosing Love Over Fear. And the reason I'd call it that is if there were any book that was like dedicated to the destruction of fear, this fat text is, I think, 2,000 pages of destroying fear. I never resonated with this book, or it never came across my path until I got to a pretty deep place in meditation and enough clarity that it kind of called to me. But I'd like to mention it if it appeals to you earlier on in the journey than it did me. It's pretty hard to read. I think you could say that fear is the cost of truth. That fear is the cost of truth. That to pursue truth, the price you pay for that is fear. And it's also what you lose, because I would say that truth is the solvent to fear. And you watching this, you have a calling for truth. This calling in you, most people turn it off. I think you will, in your life, have a pretty hard time turning that off, and I wouldn't recommend it. And to follow that calling is really leaving the crowd to follow your path, which I'll go into in more detail later. But I just want to say to you now, you have permission to seek truth. If no one else tells you that, if you get anything out of this, you have permission to seek truth. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need to get the approval, because people won't give it to you. A lot of people won't give it to you. A lot of people will tell you that you can't do that, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't follow your interests, you have to believe this, you have to believe that. None of that's true. Those are just words. They don't have any real weight or control over your calling to seek. And that calling is a lot stronger than anyone's words. And when you do pursue truth, you inspire everyone to pursue life. You inspire everyone to reach higher. Even if they don't think you're right, even if they don't agree with you, which they won't, and they don't need to. It's not really your job to make them agree with you or be right with you. But doing that gives them permission to seek what's out there for themselves. Because they know that if they go out and seek something, they could be wrong. They will be wrong. That's part of the path. And when you're constantly growing, learning, searching, striving every single day, and you're still okay, and you weather storms and you're still okay, they see that, and your message to your world, to others, is that it's okay. It's okay to seek. It's a message that it's possible for them. The most powerful messages in history, all of the greats, have been the message that you have your freedom now. You don't have to get permission to get freedom. You don't gain freedom from anything. You have freedom. There's not anything that can actually stop you from being free. You are free. And the most powerful messages in history have been people who they they fought for what was true, and nothing really could stop them. There wasn't anything stopping them from honoring that universal timeless truth that might have been, we are all equal and deserving. This truth that we know deep deep in our soul, that circumstances and situations don't actually apply to. There's a possibility that you can choose truth at any moment in any circumstance. There's not actually any external thing that can stop you from that. On your intrinsic gifts, if you're watching this, you're a talented person, and you're told you were talented, you were told you were gifted, you're told you had potential. At the same time, the world shows you this is how you do things, this is how we live, this is how you need to think, this is the way that we think. And you can see those people around you, and you're an observer, you're aware, so you see the results of what they think, how they live, what they believe, and you can see that one leads to two, and that they're not the results you want, and they're not the results that cause your talents to flourish. Which means that there's a choice you have to make. If you want to live up to what they see in you, your potential, you can't do what they do. You would have to carve your own path, and carve a path that could realize your potential, could realize what they see in you. The system is designed to ensure that your talents will never be actualized. The system doesn't allow you to flourish. It ensures that you do not. So there's only one certain way to ensure that your talents never actualize, and that's to not try at all, to go the beaten and narrow, well, the beaten path, the well-trodden path. The well-trodden path leads where it leads. It doesn't lead to anything. So there's the risk of carving your own path and failing, or the risk of just never trying at all, and eventually your calling or your spirit, eventually that voice starts to turn off, and you accept reality, as they call it, and it's over. No adventure on that path. When I was starting out, I picked up some self-help books, and found a lot of people say they hate self-help, and self-help doesn't work. And I'm going to say that the key players in the self-help space are targeting the people that are like them, people that are, I call them naturals, these talented people. And it doesn't apply for everyone, so it makes perfect sense that a lot of people would hate self-help. They don't get anything from it. And I'm not saying that not everyone's talented. I'm saying that some people they don't follow that calling in them. And there's a few key players in that space. Simon Sinek is classic, and although he has a message to the world, which is it's not what you do, it's why you do it. If you pay attention to him, he's quite skilled in finding someone's why, he calls it. He's good at finding their intrinsic gifts. Tony Robbins and his friends also do that. And Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi was the author of flow. He is the creator of the concept of flow in science. He's kind of a really good marketer for our kind of people, for people who are intrinsically motivated. He called it the autotelic personality, and he called it the development of an autotelic personality. He was basically barging into science, putting in science terms this path, which is if you follow your inner knowing, your intrinsic calling, you could develop a personality he called the autotelic personality. It's a fancy way of saying you could actualize your potential and find the models and the systems that work for you and live a life that you intuitively learn. As you develop your intuition, you intuitively are guided by it. And this intuition is your genius. It is the genius inside people. It's connected to genius. And as you learn to cultivate it, it's the same genius that other intuitives have. It's one genius, which means that as you get older, you will pick up the models of other intuitives and integrate them, and they will work for you. As far as I'm concerned, the intuition is singular in its design. It's a something like a genius, intelligent designer that knows how to harmonize relationships and work and life and balance. And your intuition can pick up and adopt models as you go along that make it easier for you to clearly see a path, although other people may not be able to see it. And as you deepen in the intuition, you will increase your sensitivity. At some point, you'll probably find yourself as an empath, and at a later point, at least have access to the psychic abilities, which are really the intuitive abilities that are dormant in every person. I believe that they are supposed to be active, a normal thing for all of us, that we were given the gifts that we needed to operate in our world, and these gifts are part of that. So on to expanded frames of reality for facing and looking at fear. You have as I've mentioned before, the direction of the unknown that you look into, it's the same direction that your calling pulls to. And it's the direction of truth. The truth is unknown, so it's over here. You can't see what's over here, so there's fear. Everyone has that fear. Everyone has the fear of death, but they're not focused on truth or their calling, so they can kind of ignore it. It's a lot more difficult to ignore when your guiding light, your calling, is always pointing you to look in that direction. And that's where courage comes in, is that on the pursuit of truth, you do look in that direction for yourself, for others, for your calling, for the thing that's calling you. And in that direction, there are many people who've walked that path that have found their true identity, the truth. I'd like to talk about it more in a later video, but most of our media, the creators have tried to leave breadcrumbs in this area. A good example are fiction that have to do with virtual reality or video games. with a main player, a main protagonist, like Sword Art Online, which had Kirito, and if I recall correctly, he at the end he finds the world seed, which is the ability to be the game dev to recreate the game. And he happens to be a creator himself. He happens to just be the perfect kind of person to get access to that. And if I recall, he, instead of using it to reshape the game, he basically open sources virtual reality so that everyone can create their worlds at the risk and the consequence of not knowing what will happen, but choosing freedom, choosing to allow everyone to create their world. So his truth in that sense becomes a bit of a greater truth instead of his own personal idea of a perfect truth. He just open ends it and says, well, let's let everyone find their creativity. Ready Player One is another example of that, where same thing, the game dev has left keys in the game. He's left the master key, and he's left it so that someone just like him, who's a visionary like him, who's inspired like him, is going to be the only one who can decode his hidden breadcrumbs to give him the power to create, the power to create life, the power to create his world. These metaphors are given to us throughout history, throughout great creators and great thinkers who've been on this lonelier road, more the lone wolf path, the observer, seeker, wanderer. So I said I'd give a expanded perspective, and there's only one that I've seen across the board. And in our life, in every person's life, there's a pattern interrupt in the matrix, and it's when someone dies. And when someone dies, everybody stops. They take a look at their life. They rethink it. What was I doing? Was I living the way that I wanted to live? Was I focused on the things I wanted to focus on? It happens to every person. But every successful person I've ever seen, without exception, has had some variance of a perspective where they wake up in the morning and they're aware of their mortality. They're constantly aware, vigilant. They're vigilant to the idea that this might be it. And some of them have variations. Some of them, their perspective is like, I just came down into this body and now I'm in Tyler's body, and now what do I want to do? If I just got here, I just plugged in to be the player of the game. It's the same. As I said, everyone encounters that perspective, but they don't grab onto it. There's a grabbing on part. There's a constancy part. If you want to have a consistent goal, there's a constancy of waking up in the morning and remembering it. My background was in Christianity, so that was waking up and surrendering to Christ again. It's waking up and first thing on your mind setting the goal again. And I'm not saying that you remember it first thing when you wake up. Per se, life changes, life has different seasons. But you have a common focus throughout your life of a reminder of, what am I doing here? We're talking about being a little bit more conscious here. It just happens most successful people don't need to pursue spirituality because they're a little bit conscious. They're a little bit conscious of their life. They're a little bit conscious of their world, of what's going on our identity, on true identity, true self, and fulfillment, joy, happiness. One thing that makes humans feel fulfilled is when they feel like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, fulfilling their purpose. Except the people in our world are oppressed, and if you stay oppressed, you become depressed. It's very depressing to not be doing the work that you think you should be doing. Now, we have the idea of hunter-gatherer societies being the early primitive human societies, where you had gatherers who gathered and you had hunters who went out into the unknown and brought back something to the tribe. In our world, that would be going out, finding understanding. Our world's oppressed. We go out, we find understanding, and we bring back understanding that could help the tribe. We go out on an adventure. Our problem is right now, people are so oppressed that the gatherers are scared to go out, and the hunters are scared to go out too. The hunters aren't going to tell you to go out, they're just pretending to be gatherers. And then in some cases, you might have a gatherer who thinks he's a hunter. You're not, by the way. You're definitely not a gatherer watching this video. The calling, it's in it's in your nature, it's it's in your blueprint, it's in your job to go out and be this hunter. Well, if a gatherer goes out and a gatherer finds all the dangers out there and comes out and gets hurt, he's going to come back and he's going to preach the doctrine of gatherers 10 times harder and make sure no one ever goes out there. I think that some people, they have that journey. I've seen that journey. Their journey is to go out, one taste for adventure, come back, and that's where they're at. The eternal wanderer, the seeker, the truth seeker, he goes out on multiple expeditions. And you might come back from the first expedition and you don't find anything. You come back broken and bruised and hurt, and everyone says, "See, I told you so. I told you not to go out into the unknown where you get hurt. I'm so glad you're back. So glad we can go back to normal reality, the way things were." But you go out on another one and then you do bring something back. And that can be a very fulfilling thing. As I mentioned, for me, going out, what I found was meditation. I found something that I wasn't too sure about at first, but something that could bring more awareness to people, to bring them maybe to a place a little more conscious, to where they could look at the patterns in their life. And I also went far enough on that road that seeking truth, seeing clearly, more clearly over time, and getting more clarity, and following teachers connected to the source, I eventually did come to have an experience of truth, and that was the death of the majority of fear, which was the fear of death. And I saw, as many have seen, that there is no death. Death doesn't exist, it can't exist, it's not possible to exist. And when the mind sees that, it's one thing to think about it. It's one, and maybe people have an experience of death and then they come back and it's like, whoa, that was cool. But when you tangibly see that there's no death, it's like seeing something. It's like seeing a table is seeing the ground. Once you know it's there, it's there. Once you see that there's no death, that just kind of drops. And as you get more clear, you start to notice that people are hallucinating most of the time. They're like walking around, kind of like they have a VR screen in front of them. They're hallucinating their own fears of death. They have an idea, an imagination, and they project it out in front of them like a VR screen. And they're living, ducking and dodging their own projected fear. It's kind of a walking hypnotic sleep for something that doesn't really exist. And we know this comes in terms of clarity, comes with logic. With logic, you know that no one's seeing death, that their fear of death can't be real because no one has died. No one has really died in the sense that they haven't come back to talk about it. Which gets funny if you get deep enough to that we're like blipping in and out of existence every second. You're dying every millisecond, trillisecond. So if you'd like to connect more, spend some more time connecting to that infinite, unlimited super you, that greater you, maybe it's your higher self, maybe a more timeless self, or starting to find your being, your beingness. I'm creating an ultimate super you meditation. I don't know what it'll be called, but when that's ready, I will invite you to it. In the description below, I'll include a link for it. Thanks for watching. My next video will be titled something like From Seeker to Mystic, and it'll be right here. It'll cover understanding more of the creative type, the observer type, and how we're not alone in this world. I think you'll love it. So thank you very much. See you later.